Let's meet James Woody, the Executive Director of Sutton Scholars, a high school enrichment program sponsored by the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. With Mr. Woody today is our Good News team, Deacons John Shematek and Lauren Welch, as we bring another episode in our second season of Good News, all about people making a difference in the world.
James Woody, welcome to our podcast, Good News. We're thrilled to have you and learning more about you and Sutton Scholars. Very happy that you're here with us today.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
So I guess one thing, I know you've had a very long career and very strong interest in youth and helping particularly disadvantaged youth over the course of your lifetime. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get to where you are now in terms of your particular gifts for the world?
Sure. That's a fascinating question. I started my career in the corporate sector and did marketing and strategic planning for a number of years, and came to the conclusion that I was not going to get maximum fulfillment by focusing on making money for others. I was asked to consider serving on the board of a homeless shelter in Washington, D.C., called Community of Hope. I served on the board for a number of years. The founding executive director of that organization announced that he was going to be leaving to pursue some activities nationally, and I was asked to serve on the search committee for the replacement for that gentleman. And somehow, after serving on the search committee for a number of weeks, I think I missed a meeting or two and came back, and I was greeted with the notion that they had found who they were looking for, and that person was me. So the moral of that story is never miss a search committee meeting. But I spoke to my wife about the possibility of leading an organization that served not only homeless families, but had a health clinic, a medical clinic, and a number of other educational opportunities for families. I said to my wife, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like this is something that we should seriously consider. And without hesitation, she replied, if this is something that you feel God is calling you to do, then let's do it. We'll just change course. I'm sure we'll be just fine. 6 weeks later, I was the executive director and president of the Community of Hope Incorporated in Washington, D.C. That was the beginning of my journey with nonprofit service and ministry. Over the last 30 plus years, I've been involved in a number of nonprofits. As I look back on it, there was a connecting thread through all of them. And that connecting thread was spirituality. I became a Christian when I was 17 years old and was always looking for ways to serve in a way that I felt would do justice to my faith and help promote the kingdom of God. Most of the organizations that I've worked with were a part of that spiritual journey as much as a journey of service.
Wow, that's a great story. I didn't know about your experience at 17. I mean, you found Christ at that age?
Yes, it's 17. I think something that's important to my story is that I grew up with Bishop Eugene Taylor Sutton. He and I have known each other since kindergarten. When I was 17, he invited me to be a part of a youth group. I had always been engaged in church work on lots of levels. I was the youth superintendent of my Sunday school at the Baptist church I attended when I was 16. In many respects, I was going through the motions. Being a part of church had been a part of my family tradition for generations, but it wasn't until I had gotten invited to that youth group when I had what you described accurately as a conversion experience. I came face to face with my own shortcomings and sin, if you will, and made a decision to turn in a different direction. And from 17 until this day, that has been the arc of my life.
So, James, it sounds like spirituality is a really important part of all the work you do. You bring that to wherever you are with the boys or whoever you're working with.
That's absolutely right.
How do you see that helping the people that you work with?
Well, I believe very strongly, Lauren, that we are all spiritual beings. Many of the physical challenges we face are rooted in some spiritual cause, or at least in a spiritual dimension. One of the Most important experiences of my life was being asked to serve as the founding director of the Bishop John T. Walker School for Boys in Washington, D.C. The Bishop Walker School was a school we launched in 2008, and I'm honored that I was the first employee of that institution. We decided very consciously that boys, in particular African American boys in underserved parts of Washington, D.C., were experiencing a crisis. That crisis involved things like dropping out of school and getting into trouble with the law at a proportion that was disproportionate to their presence in the population. The Bishop Walker School was founded as a kindergarten through fifth grade school that was tuition free. It's an Episcopal school that is tuition free. I had the privilege of spending a number of years raising lots of money to help provide a tuition free education to boys in Washington, D.C. We realized that our resources would be limited, and so we wanted to focus our energies where we thought we could have the most impact. Serving boys who were in many respects falling through the cracks was where we decided to focus our attention.
So, James, I can't think of how challenging that must have been in so many ways. You had to, thinking of a tuition free, there obviously was the financial aspect of that, and then just working with the children, students, youth that may or may not have been really that interested in what you were trying to do. Was that an issue? Because there's a generational gap there in some ways, I
Well,
guess.
that's very perceptive, John. When we started in 2007 and the school opened in 2008, the Episcopal Church did not have a particularly strong presence in that quadrant of Washington, D.C., in the southeast quadrant. There were a couple of parishes, but there was a lack of familiarity with the Episcopal Church in that part of the city. One of the biggest challenges was to get people in that community to understand what we were trying to accomplish. I'll never forget going door to door, knocking to try and get to know folks in the community and tell them about what we were doing. I used to say we were a tuition-free school, and I thought that would really excite people because they wouldn't have to pay tuition. And one day somebody stopped me and said, I don't know why you lead with that line because all schools here are tuition-free. Most students go to public schools, and the idea of paying tuition was not on the radar of any of the families or students we were targeting. So we had to change our spiel a little bit. And one of the things that we ended up focusing on was the idea that here was a school that also had a spiritual component to it. Surprisingly to me, that was very exciting to families in the community. Though they did not have a frame of reference with the Episcopal Church, they did have strong connections with a number of other non-denominational or Baptist entities in the community. Many families were looking for a place that they thought would be a safe and loving place for their sons to be educated. And so once we understood that was one of the primary desires and needs from families, we finally reached the sweet spot for what our message would be.
What a discovery that faith is something that will draw people. That's
Yes, that's
great.
right. And that was contrary to what a lot of us believed at the time. People were hungry to find and again, safe was an important one because in many underserved communities, violence is something that families and young people have to contend with. Once they felt comfortable that we would be a place where their sons would be cared for in a loving and appropriate manner, it really did make a huge difference. And the school is thriving to this day. Actually, just a couple of nights ago, I went to their annual fundraising dinner. It was really exciting to see that the school is on firm footing and is doing well.
That's great. The alumni are doing well.
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we had a couple of alumni perform at the dinner, which is held in the nave of the Washington National Cathedral.
Oh,
One of our boys sang a Frank Sinatra tune, which was a real showstopper, so to speak. Another one talked very eloquently about his plans. He's graduating from high school this year and his plans for college and what he hopes to do in the future. It was really inspirational to see young men that I knew when they were in kindergarten who are now either in college or graduating from high school, concrete plans and desires for their lives. That's a very satisfying and fulfilling part of my journey. I retired from the Bishop Walker School in July of 2022. My wife and I moved from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, which we now call home. And it was a part of that retirement transition during which Bishop Sutton approached me and asked how I was planning on spending my next phase. I said, basically being retired. But as fate would have it, and the fact that he's such a long-standing and dear friend, he asked if I would consider extending some of my leadership experience to the Sutton Scholars Program, which was named in his honor. Very difficult for me to turn down that opportunity. Having served on the advisory board of Sutton Scholars for a number of years, I was very familiar with the program and was delighted to have that be a part of the next phase of my employment.
Yeah, we definitely resonate with you about being retired and yet having Bishop Sutton say, okay, now what you're going to do in your retirement is what? It's inspired at least all three of us, but many, countless others. So
that's a particular strength of his, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So that's how you became involved with the Sutton Scholars Program. We have all kinds of people that watch and listen to the podcast. Some of them will know right off the bat what Sutton Scholars are, what the Episcopal Church is, and what a diocese is, and so on. Can you just talk a little bit about the Sutton Scholars Program and how it works and what you're hoping to accomplish with it?
Sure, be happy to. The Sutton Scholars Program was formed in 2016. It is a high school enrichment program sponsored by the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. Bishop Sutton was quick to realize that young people need someone to help provide guidance and direction. He and I were a part of a youth group when we were teenagers that surrounded us with adult support, mentoring, and guidance. And he believed that he wanted something like that to be a formal part of life in the Diocese of Maryland. It's important to mention that the Sutton Scholars Enrichment Program is not an academic program. So we are not focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's something all young people have to develop if they're going to be successful. But it's also not a religious program. Sutton Scholars focuses on life skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, things like leadership, communication, financial literacy, advocacy. We want to work with young people on developing skills they may not be getting exposure to in their high schools. We serve young people from around the city of Baltimore. This past year, we worked with young people from 10 different high schools. We work with young people in grades 8 through 12. What we do is we assign the young people, once they fill out an application and are accepted into the program. We are currently serving about 75 young people each summer. Primary focus of Sutton Scholars is a 6-week summer program. During that summer program, we drill down on some of the skills I referenced. Each cohort of students is led by an instructor. Many of our instructors are teachers in public schools primarily. High school teachers, but sometimes they may be middle school teachers as well. And we, over the last couple of years, have developed a curriculum which hones in on the skills I referenced previously. The goal is to have a program that is fun, engaging, and that young people want to come back to every summer. The goal is to have a young person join with us in 8th grade and continue through their senior year of high school, and then we continue to support them informally in college or in vocational school or whatever they choose to do on a post-secondary basis.
James, what has surprised you most while at working with the Sutton Scholars?
Yeah, it can be an incredibly difficult age. And one of the things that surprised the whole world was the pandemic. When we look back on 2020, 2021, and in some measure 2022, I knew that this was going to be a challenge. But what surprised me was how much the pandemic has affected our young people's ability to engage with each other and others socially. I think there's something about having been trapped behind a computer screen for as long as many of our young people were, that had an adverse impact on their ability to communicate effectively and engage socially. And so we've had to spend a great deal of energy and focus helping them reemerge from their shells created by the coronavirus pandemic. It's been more than a notion to drill down and get them to reemerge in ways that are confident and enable them to communicate effectively with each other and with adults. I'm surprised by the impact the pandemic had on our young people's ability to engage socially.
And what a blessing it was to have this gift of scholars for them, because many young people haven't come out of their shell because they didn't have this kind of support and help. So thank you.
Well, yeah, it's been an incredible pleasure and an honor to work with young people who have experienced that kind of challenge. But the other thing that's been surprising to me, and it's kind of the opposite, is how resilient our young people are and how hungry they are to learn new skills and be exposed to different kinds of experiences. My faith in young people, not that it ever was completely shaken, but if you read the media, you tend to hear negative things about young people, particularly those in high school. But one of the things that I am happy to report is that there is a great deal of hope on the part of folks who are in the Sutton Scholars Program. And for me personally, I absolutely am confident that our futures will be in good hands if we as adults do what we are supposed to be doing with regard to teaching, training, nurturing, caring for, and mentoring this next generation. One of the things that we have emphasized with our young people is speaking up for themselves. We talk a lot about advocacy. Part of what we try to encourage them to do and model for them is how to speak up in ways that are both powerful and respectful. It's important that they be able to represent their own interests. Part of what we do at Sutton Scholars, and maybe it's an overarching theme, is what we call building a better Baltimore. We recognize that not all of our young people are destined to spend the rest of their lives in Baltimore, but we recognize that there are some issues and challenges in Baltimore, like there are in, any other city. And one of the things that we want them to be able to do is to be in positions of leadership to help remedy the challenges they face and to rectify situations that are problematic, not just for them, but for their communities. One of the things that we do every summer is we take our young people on a number of field trips. Summer before last, we decided to go to City Hall because we wanted our scholars to meet a council person. They met the police chief, the president of the city council, and they were able to engage in conversation with some of these city leaders for about an hour. As part of our preparation, one of the questions that I asked our scholars was, if you had the opportunity, when you graduate from high school, how many of you, by show of hands, would leave Baltimore? About 2/3 of the group, surprisingly to me, raised their hands and said, yep, we'd be out on the next bus. And I was really surprised by that. It caused me to do a deep introspective dive on why my perspective on Baltimore is so different than many of our young people's perspectives. That frankly had to do with their experiences. They have seen, sadly, some of the negative aspects of what it is to live in Baltimore at this point in history, and frankly feel like they need to get out in order to experience the kinds of opportunities that will give them a fighting chance at having the kinds of lives they want. One of the things that we are really excited about, since 2 summers ago, the number of young people who would say they are interested in leaving has decreased remarkably. That's because we have recommitted ourselves to showing them the beauty of their city. We go to museums and we do at least 2 or 3 college visits, focusing on colleges and universities that are either in the city or directly adjacent to the city in Baltimore County. Being exposed to some of the things that make Baltimore such a special and rich place, I think is slowly but surely changing the perspectives on some of our young people. If you don't know the beauty and the joy that can exist through that which takes place in your own hometown, sometimes you just assume that it. And so part of what we are committed to doing is exposing our young people to some hidden gems that exist in the city in terms of places and people and institutions that will help them understand why Baltimore is such a special place.
James, I was wondering, I think you mentioned there are about 75 Sutton scholars. Is that the right number? Is this scalable in any way? Do you have a plan? Or are you saying this is what God wants us to do and this is how we're going to do it?
Prior to the pandemic, our numbers had actually gone up to just over 100.
Wow.
And we were excited about that. Then the pandemic hit and our numbers went down to 30 or something like that. 75 feels like a good number for us because it affords us the opportunity to go a little deeper with each scholar than we might have been able to do if the numbers had been as large as they were. One of the things that I think we have come to learn is bigger is not necessarily better as it relates to this program. And so 75 feels, frankly, to be about the perfect number. One of the things that I failed to mention in my description of the program is that we actually compensate our young people through a stipend. So each scholar receives a stipend and we pay them to participate in the program. The more scholars we have, the more money we have to raise to pay that stipend, which is a challenge. But one of the things that is important to understand is why we feel like that stipend is so important. For people who are familiar with summer employment in Baltimore, and there are programs like it throughout the country, often cities, and Baltimore has a program that is called YouthWorks. And so it's a summer employment program where young people get employed to work in the private sector, government settings, or nonprofits. And they get paid minimum wage to participate. One of the things that we understood early on about Sutton Scholars is that a program like YouthWorks, in some respects, a competitor of ours because of the stipend. Young people rely on the stipend to buy school supplies, supplement their family's income. Without the stipend, because they could easily go someplace else, like the YouthWorks program. The competitive aspect is that they pay a stipend, and for us to not would put us at a disadvantage in terms of attracting the kind of young people that would most benefit from our program. Interestingly, we are not, over the last couple of years, having to recruit students as aggressively because the students themselves and their families by word of mouth have been sharing the good news about what goes on at the Sutton Scholars Program. They have been coming to us voluntarily, which is a really exciting development in our growth as a program.
James, I guess the other question that comes to mind for me right now is just thinking about all this amazing work that Sutton Scholars is doing and the work that the scholars themselves are doing. Some of our viewers and listeners are really interested in helping promote good things. What is it that someone can do to help support Sutton Scholars? What concrete things might one of us do?
One of the questions that I find interesting that I get fairly often is, besides giving money, what can I do to support the program? And I'm not sure why we want to skip over the giving money part as being an important part of the puzzle. We are a program that is funded by our own fundraising efforts. The diocese has been very generous, but the diocese is not in a position to pay for the entire program. And so we have to raise the money that we use to pay the stipends, to hire our instructors, to go on field trips, to rent buses. We provide 2 meals a day to our scholars during the summer. We operate out of Mercy High School on Northern Parkway in Baltimore City, and we have to rent that facility from Mercy High School. Finances are an important piece of the puzzle. For those that are moved to support us financially, I encourage generous support there, and that can be done. We can be reached through suttonscholars.org or through the diocesan website, episcopalmaryland.org. We are having a fabulous summer experience, which includes 4 days at the Claggett Center in Adamstown. Our young people need to get away from the city. We spend 3 nights and 4 days at Claggett every year, which is just an old-fashioned season of fun. So the young people play sports, volleyball, kickball, they ride bikes, they canoe, spend lots of time in the pool because it's always hot in the summertime. Generously supporting Sutton Scholars financially is an important aspect of how we maintain the work that we do. Skills that we try to expose our young people to need others to help reinforce. From time to time, we'll have guest speakers come in who can talk about professions that young people may want to consider pursuing. We talk about conflict resolution. This year, I'm hopeful and looking forward to Bishop Carey doing a workshop on conflict resolution. But there are lots of people spread out throughout the community who have expertise in financial literacy or conflict resolution or interviewing skills. Those kinds of volunteer opportunities exist for us. Or it might be chaperoning on a field trip, going with us on a college tour. We often need people to help young people understand how to successfully complete a college application and preparing a resume and those kinds of things. And so we have a curriculum where our instructors are the key players in helping our young people develop these skills, but we can always benefit from working professionals who share their experience and expertise with our scholars so that they have up-to-date perspectives on what's being required in the workplace.
That's great.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Gosh, we really appreciate the time you've given us today. This has been an inspiring time. And I know Lauren always has one more question, right?
Before we go, James, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for our young people, encouraging us to know that these young people are going to be our leaders in the future and that we're in pretty good hands?
Our young people are going to be our leaders. It's up to us as the generation that precedes them to be the kind of role models they can look to learn how to lead in a way that is civil and kind. Speaking of kind, we have a mantra at Sutton Scholars that works not just for our scholars, but for all of us. Strive for success, work hard, have fun, and be kind. That kindness piece sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. We are trying to say to our scholars that life is short. We have an obligation to ourselves and each other to respect the people in our lives and be good examples to that next generation, particularly that's following us. We all have an opportunity to set an example for the person to our left or to our right, or to that person who is looking to us and following the path we have laid out for them. What's important for us as adults to show the kind of example that we would want our young people to follow. I can vouch for the young people. They are looking for good examples and wanting to lead a life that is fulfilled and exciting and that will help them change things in a way that is positive and long lasting.
James Woody, thank you. We learned so much and really appreciate the work you're doing and what God is calling you to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I always love talking about Sutton Scholars.
John and I want to thank all who are watching and listening. We can't do this without your participation. Again, thank you for the gift of your time. Until next time, peace and blessings.
This episode of Good News has been brought to you by Listening for Clues. For more podcasts, check out our YouTube channel or our website, listeningforclues.com, or just about any audio podcast platform. Be sure to comment, like, or share. Thanks for being with us today.